Hello, hi, very happy good evening. So this is Krishna and we've been talking about the story of life on earth, and that's biology. So welcome to my new beginning series. Yes guys, hello, and thank you so much for joining exactly on time. So I'm really proud and thankful to my sincere students. Hi Shiva, hi Bhavya, hello Supriya. Yes, a very happy good evening. So thank you so much for joining my session. So please do like, share and subscribe. I hope you guys are doing really well, and Diwali is around the corner next week, so I guess you guys are in a festive mood. So even if not, so we are going to have a minty much before Diwali, so get ready, so start preparing. So please do ask me some doubts, because till now no one has put up any question as a query, but let's see how you guys perform in the minty. Yes ma'am, a very good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. So please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Well, so today we're going to talk about bones. So we are done with the first half of the lecture, that the chapter that is the locomotion and movement. So we spoke about what is locomotion, what is movement, what are the structures, what are the types of movement, what is the structure of a muscle, and what are the types of muscle and how muscle contracts. So we also spoke about the two types of contractile proteins, that is actin and myosin, right? Today we are going to talk about the skeletal system. So the skeletal system is made up of bones and cartilages. So we'll not be dealing in depth about cartilages, but we'll be talking about bones. So there are two types of bones. So we'll talk about one type today and tomorrow the next type. And then we have joints. So we'll be done with this chapter by Friday. Okay. And 27th, so we have a minty from the chapters that I have covered so far. So start preparing. So maybe you have 30 questions in the minty, and the time limit for the questions are pretty less. So you have only 25 seconds to answer a question. So please train yourself to read the question, understand and give the right answer. Yes. Yeah, it's not showing that it has started. So kindly refresh your page. Shiva, kindly refresh your page. Maybe there are some network issues, so kindly refresh the page, so I guess you can see me then. Well, so we are going to talk about bones. So bones are always, ma'am, how do we remember all the 206 bones? Relax, it's not tough. So if you feel remembering 206 bones is tough, then becoming doctor is all the more tough. So we're just going to talk about it. So we are going to take it very casually and see at the end of the lecture if you're able to count at least 80 out of 206. So let's see how we are going to do that. So once again, welcome to my session. So guys, please lend us your support and sharing the channel, spread the words. That's what I want. So there are a lot of students who are in need of a free platform to study, and here we have a complete free platform. So let them know. And as you also know, biology is a subject with a lot of weightage in NEET. So we have 360 marks in biology, and if you get 360 on 360, yes, your base is set, right? So that's all I would like to say, and let's move into bones today. So before we move into bones, so did you guys understand muscle contraction? Yes? Is muscle contraction easy? Yep, it started now. Great. Okay. So did you guys understand muscle contraction? Is there anyone who has a doubt as to how it happens? So did you understand the structure of the two contractile proteins? So we only have two contractile proteins. One is actin and myosin. So the structure of the two protein must be clear, and how the muscle contracts, so that should also be clear. Fine. So let's move into today's lecture. So giving you a quick or a rough idea of how muscle contracts. So I'm not going in detail, I'm just revising the previous lecture, so what we spoke in yesterday's class. Fine. So let's move forward. So muscle contraction. So for muscle contraction, so I guess you know the structure of a skeletal muscle now. So skeletal muscle consists of muscle bundle. So inside the muscle bundle we have your muscle fiber. So inside the muscle fiber we have the myofibril, and the myofibril has the structural and function unit of a muscle, that is sarcomere, right? So we are going to talk about muscle contraction, where the sarcomere has light and dark bands. So the light band is given by a protein, that is actin, and the dark band is given by a protein, that is myosin. Right? So actin and myosin both are polymerized proteins. So actin is made up of two F actins, plus it is made up of tropomyosin. So at regular intervals on tropomyosin, so we have troponin. Fine. So the two F actins are each made up of individual G actins. So that was the structure of actin. So on regular intervals, we have troponin, which marks the binding site of actin and myosin. So the next one is myosin. So myosin is also a polymerized protein. So the individual units are known as meromyosins. So we have heavy meromyosin and we have light meromyosin. Fine. So heavy meromyosin has the head and the tail, the head and the neck, and the light meromyosin has the tail. Okay. Excuse me. So now how does the muscle contraction happen? So the brain sends the signal through the neuron. So the neuron which picks up the signal from the brain is known as the motor neuron. So it takes the signal to the muscle. So this motor neuron and the muscle together is known as the motor end plate. Right? So the space between the neuron and the muscle is known as the neuromuscular junction. So now what happens? So we have someone called as Abhi. Hello. So thank you for joining my session. So please do like, share and subscribe. So when the neuron brings the signal to the neuromuscular junction, so the neurotransmitters are released here. So we have the release of neurotransmitters here. So when the neurotransmitters are released in this space, it activates the sarcolemma. So sarcolemma is the plasma membrane of the muscle fiber. So when the sarcolemma is activated, so this causes the release of the calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum into the sarcoplasm. So when you have more calcium concentration in the sarcoplasm, so troponin comes and binds to the calcium. So now actin and myosin are ready to bind to each other. So the best known mechanism of muscle contraction is explained by the sliding filament hypothesis. So now what happens? So your structure of the myosin is like this. Right? So you have an ATP binding site, you have an active binding site. Ma'am, from tomorrow onwards, I would not be regular as our offline classes will be opening. But that's really good. So after a long time, you're going to our offline class, but definitely we will miss you here. So whenever you get time, so please watch our recorded lectures and any doubt, get back to me. But please make sure you join for the mentee on 27th of October, right? Okay, so this is the myosin structure. So once the troponin moves away from the actin, now it is time for actin and myosin to bind. So first the ATP will bind here. So once the ATP will bind, so then the actin binds to myosin. So binding of actin and myosin forms a cross bridge. So after the cross bridge is formed, the ATP is hydrolyzed into ADP plus PI. So when this hydrolyzed and comes out, the cross bridge is broken and the muscle contraction ends. But this is how the muscle contracts. So when the muscle is contracting, the I band, the length of the I band shortens more because it is sliding, right? So the length of the I band shortens and the length of the A band remains the same. So this is the mechanism of muscle contraction. Hi Dharni, yes, so how are you? So I guess you are busy with your offline classes or school classes as well. A very happy good evening and thank you so much for joining my lecture despite your busy schedule. So please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Okay, so this is the recap of muscle contraction. Now let's move forward and talk about bones. So basically we're going to talk about the skeletal system. So the skeletal system, we know that forms the backbone, or you can say the framework of the body, right? So this structure of the human being is given by the framework, that is the skeletal system. So the framework of bones and few cartilages makes up your skeletal system. So what is a cartilage? So cartilage is not as hard as a bone, but it's a bit flexible. So your tip of your nose is a cartilage. So your outer ear is a cartilage, right? So you have the framework of bones and a few cartilage that makes up the skeletal system. So bones and cartilage are specialized connective tissues. So I told you in the animal system, we have 4 types of tissues. So what are the 4 types of tissues? So we have epithelial, collective, muscular and neural, right? So we have this connective tissue. So your bone and your cartilage are specialized connective tissue. Yes, so cartilages are made up of chondrocytes. You're absolutely right. So the bone is a hard matrix due to calcium salts. So for example, this is a bone, right? So I will not be able to fold my bone into 2 halves because my bone has a hard matrix. So the ground substance is pretty hard for the bone. That is because of the calcium salts that is present. Whereas my cartilage is not very hard, it is malleable. It is flexible, right? So that is because of the chondroitin salts. So what marks the demarcation between the bone and the cartilage is the presence of the salts. So bones are hard because of the calcium salts. Cartilages are soft or flexible because of the chondroitin salts, right? So the cells of the bone are called as, so this is how it is. So between bones we have a cartilage. Ma'am, then what are joints? The movement is given by joints, okay? But in between 2 bones we have a cartilage, fine? Okay, so the cells of the bones are called as osteocytes. So cytes means cells, okay? So cells of the cartilage are called as chondrocytes. Like Shiva told us, so that was an absolutely right answer. Yes, you're very good. So that's what I have also written. So make sure you remember these 2 terms. One is osteocytes and the other one is chondrocytes. Fine? Okay. So now we're going to talk only about the bones. So we're not going to worry about the cartilage here. So let's talk about the bones here, right? So the humans have 206 bones. I guess no one has any doubt in that. So there are people who would think there are 300 bones. That is in case of infants or the child that is newly born, because in the newly formed child, the bones are not properly joined. So they're not well developed. For example, if we have it as a single bone, they can have it in parts of 4, and as the child grows, it joins, right? So that is why the young baby's neck is also very flexible, right? Okay, so the humans have 206 bones and we have a few cartilage. So where are the 206 bones and what are the 206 bones? So that is the story for today's class and tomorrow's class, right? So the bones, this 206 bones are divided into 2 categories. So you have 1000 bones. Oh my God. So can you please lend us a few? Yes, so that I can show in live class. So this is this bone, this is this bone, huh? So can you give us your vertebral column? So if you have 1000 bones, then I guess you should have 2-3 vertebral columns. Okay, well, so these 206 bones are divided into 2 categories. One is axial and the other one is appendicular, okay? Oh my God, you're not willing to donate. Okay, so the bones are divided into 2 categories. One is axial and one is appendicular. So axial skeleton has 80 bones, and the remaining 126 is from the appendicular skeleton. Ma'am, what are this axial and appendicular? So let me tell you. So just like I divided into batch A and batch B. So let's say A to P, alphabets A to P, whose name starts from alphabet A to P are in section A, and whose name starts after P are in section B. So I have a basis of classification, right? So similarly, when I say 206 bones are divided into 2 forms or 2 divisions, one is axial and appendicular. So axial having 80 bones and appendicular having 126 bones. So on what basis it has been classified? So today we are going to talk about axial skeleton. So tomorrow we are going to talk about appendicular skeleton. Fine. So let's talk about axial skeleton. So why is it called as the axial skeleton? Because it is present along the body axis. So that is the main reason it is called as the axial skeleton. So axial skeleton comprises of 80 bones which is distributed along the main axis of the body. Sorry for the typo error. So axial skeleton, out of the 206 bones, 80 bones are present in the axial region, the one that is present along the axis of the body. So this contributes 80 bones. So what are the axial parts? Skull, vertebral column, sternum and the ribs. So to look at the picture, it is like this. So along the body axis, whatever falls, that is your axial skeleton. So appendicular skeleton are your limbs, your hands and your legs. Okay, so axial skeleton, the one along the axis of the body. Fine. So what comes along the axis? Your skull, right? Of course, your vertebral column. So in the vertebral column, you can see a bone like this. Sorry, not in the vertebral column, on the dorsal side of the vertebral column. So, sorry, the ventral side of the vertebral column. So, you have the skull, and the dorsal side you have the vertebral column. On the ventral side, you have the ribs, and you can see a bone like this to which the ribs are attached. So, this bone is your sternum. So, all this come along the central axis of the body. So, they are known as your axial skeleton. Fine? Yes? So now how it makes up 80 bones, so that's what we are going to talk about. So let's move forward. The first one is the skull, right? So I guess all of you have the skull. Yes ma'am, all of us have the skull. The only thing that's missing is the brain that is present inside the skull. That's very true. So maybe even you have the brain, but we don't know how to make use of the brain. So let me tell you, Einstein himself used only 7% of his brain, and for that itself we have this entire complicated subject called as physics. So had Einstein used at least 12% of his brain, or say 50%, and then things would have gone more complicated beyond our understanding, right? So we are thankful that Einstein used only 7%, but we are not even using that 7%. So that's what I'm trying to say. So train your brain to work at the times of need, right? Okay, you use more than 90%, then I guess that is not the brain, you use only your skull. Okay, fine. So let's talk about the skull bone. So how many bones are there in the skull? So the skull has two sets of bone. So the bones of the skull alone I am dividing into two parts. One is cranial and one is facial. So this entire thing is the skull, right? So the skull bone, the skull houses the cranium because it has to protect the brain, and it also has facial bones, right? So I have the nasal bone, so I have the hyoid bone. So all this comes under the face. So the skull has two sets of bone, one is cranial and facial. So together it has 22 bones. So axial skeleton, so we are talking about axial skeleton. So axial skeleton has skull. So totally axial skeleton has 80 bones, right? So the first one is the skull, the second one is the vertebral column, so third one is the sternum, and the fourth one are the ribs. So sternum, I showed you, it is only one bone, right? So skull together has 22 bones. So the remaining is divided between the vertebral column and the ribs. So let's see, okay? So now we are going to talk about the skull. So totally the skull has 22 bones. It is divided into cranial and facial. Wow, look who is here. So the celebrity is here. Hi Keshav. Yes. So how are you? Good. So you told me last time that you're not well, so have you recovered? I hope you're fit and healthy now. So thank you for joining my session today. So please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. So please do watch my recorded lectures, and if you have any doubts, get back to me. Okay, so that's really nice to see you here after a long time. Okay. So it's divided into cranial and facial. So cranial bones are 8 and 14 are the facial bones. So they form the hard protective outer covering, that is the cranium, right? So the facial bones are 14 and they form a front part of the skull. So apart from the 22 bones that is divided into cranial and facial, apart from that you have 7 more in the skull. So skull totally has 29. How? Let's see. So don't get confused. So we have the skull. Okay, so let me write here. So we have the skull. So the skull is divided into cranial and facial, right? So cranial protects the skull. Sorry, protects the brain. So now we are talking about the facial. So this is 8 and this is 14. So apart from that, it has more bones. The first one is the hyoid bone. So all of us have a U-shaped bone. So this U-shaped bone, right? So this is U-shaped, right? So that is the hyoid bone. So plus 1, so 8 plus 14 plus 1, right? So apart from that, in each ear you have 3 small bones. So each ear has what is known as ear ossicles. So ear ossicles are malleus, incus and stapes. So this is 3, right? But we have 2 ears. So 3 plus 3 is 6. So plus ear ossicles. So ear ossicles are 6. So totally we have 7. So together the skull has 29 bones. Did you understand how did we get 29 here? So we are talking about axial skeleton. Yes. Ear ossicles are not the smallest bone. Only ear stapes is the smallest bone. So malleus, incus are pretty big and stapes is the smallest. Okay. So we are talking about the axial skeleton, which makes up 80 bones out of the 206 bones. So the first one is the skull. So we are talking about the skull. So the skull has totally 29 bones, but the 22 is divided into cranial and facial. So cranial is 8, facial is 14. So apart from that, we have 3 ear ossicles. So since we have 2 ears, so it is 6. Okay, and we have 1 U-shaped bone, that is the hyoid bone. So together it makes 29 bones of the skull. So 𝒊𝒅, 𝒣𝒊𝒅 and 𝒂𝒊𝒅, did you understand how did we get 29 bones? Is it clear? Fine. So we are done with the skull. But hold on, we have a last line here. Ma'am, I did not find telegram link. Where's that? You want to ask doubt on telegram? Okay, so I guess we are already in touch. Why? What happened? We are already in touch, right? So you have already asked me a lot of doubts in telegram. So where did you disappear? Okay, so I guess all of you are having a problem with the telegram. So I will look into this issue on a priority basis today. I will see what to do about this telegram, because many people told me that they are not able to have the proper telegram link. So today I'll talk to them and I'll get it sorted. Okay, so please at the end of the class give me a reminder once again to talk about the telegram group to the technical team, right? Okay, so there's a last line here which seems quite weird. So the skin, it is the skull. So the skull region articulates with the superior region of the vertebral column. So it is not skin. So I'm sorry. So the skull region articulates with the superior region of the vertebral column with the help of 2 occipital condyles. So let's say this is the skull, right? So then the vertebral column is like this. So there has to be some mode of attachment between the two, right? So that attachment is known as occipital condyles. So in this part, I have blood circulation happening. So since there are 2 points where that attachment and that circulation is there, so that is known as dicondylic circulation. That is known as dicondylic skull. So articulation is movement. I articulate, circulate. So articulation is movement. Okay. So I am able to do like this. I am able to do like this. So there is some joint movement between the head and the vertebral column, right? So that is because of this dicondylic skull. So I will exactly show you the location of this dicondylic skull. So exactly these two. That is the reason I am able to rotate my neck like this, right? So that is dicondylic skull. So exactly, so this is known as occipital condylic. So since there are 2, it is dicondylic. Di is 2. Fine. So we are done with the skull bones. So fine. So vertebral column. So now let's talk about the vertebral column now. So we are done with the skull. So sternum is 1. So totally 30 bones are done, right? Okay. So now let's conclude. So we have made 30 bones. So sternum is 1, this is 29, so we have already tallied 30, so we have remaining 50, right? Yes? Okay, so you have seen dicondylic skull in fish, yes, okay, that is also there. So now let's talk about the vertebral column. So the vertebral column, it looks like a long tail, right? So we have 26 serially arranged units, that is called as the vertebrae. So the vertebral column is made up of individual vertebrae and we have 26 of the serially arranged vertebrae. So when I say this is a square and it is made up of small squares like this, right? So similarly, vertebral column is something like this and it is made up of individual units. So it is made up of 26 individual units and they are called as vertebrae. Fine. So extends from the base of the skull and constitutes the main framework of the trunk. So it extends from the base of the skull. So if you have the skull like this, so from the base of the skull you have the main framework which forms the vertebral column. So each vertebra has a central hollow pit that is called as the neural canal through which the spinal cord passes through. So we have vertebral column and we have spinal cord. So don't confuse between the both. So let me tell you, so what is the difference between both? So we have the vertebral column, right? So we have 26 serially arranged vertebral column. Say like this. So in each of the vertebral columns, so I have a hollow tube in the center. So that is known as the neural canal. So inside the neural canal or through the neural canal, the spinal cord passes through. Is this clear? Yes. So we have the vertebral column which is made up of 26 serially arranged unit, and in each of the serially arranged unit has a hollow canal, that is the neural canal, through which the spinal cord passes. Okay, fine. So the first vertebra, so we are not going to read the names of all the 26 vertebrae. So we are going to talk about the first vertebrae. So the first vertebrae is atlas and the second one is axis. So remember only the first two. Yes. So you saw an autopsy of the spinal cord. Wow. So the first vertebral column, okay, so it's still in white. So the first vertebral column is atlas. The second one is axis. So we are not going to read the names of all the 26 vertebral columns. So we're just going to talk about the first two one. So the vertebral column is differentiated into many types. Just like the bone is differentiated into axial and appendicular, so this vertebral column is also differentiated into cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal. So we have 26, right? So cervical, first 7 are cervical vertebrae. So among that the names of the first 2 is known. So the second part is the thoracic, the third one is the lumbar, fourth one is the sacral and the last one is the coccygeal. So together it makes the 26. But I want you to remember this. So first one is cervical, so second one is thoracic. So it is CTLSC. So cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal. So cervical is 5, thoracic is 12, lumbar is 7. Sorry, lumbar, okay, so cervical is 7, lumbar is 5. So almost every mammal has 7 cervical vertebral column and last 2 are 1 and 1. So remember 7 plus 5 is 12 and that is there in between. Okay, so cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal. Fine. Okay, so we are done with the vertebral column. So here I have the figure. So this is how your vertebral column is, and the center part is hollow. So that is the neural canal through which the spinal cord passes. Okay, so cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal. So the last 2 are fused, they are not individual units. Fine. So cervical is 7, so this is 12, lumbar is 5 and this is 1 and 1. Fine. Okay, so we are done with the vertebral column, and sternum is only one flat bone. So it is considered as one flat bone. Fine. So the last one is the ribs. Okay, so you searched in the Telegram as 𝒕𝒊𝒂𝒍 live and you found the discussion channel. Okay, so guys, I would also suggest you the same. If not, don't worry, I'll get it done today. So I've asked them to do it on a priority basis. Ma'am, cervical must be towards the cervix, but it's present on the top. Okay, so no, it is not necessarily. So cervical has a particular name. So it's not because it's like, it is like an opening because it opens from the skull. So that is the reason it is cervical. So not necessarily you should have an opening only in the bottom. So you can also have an opening like in the top, right? Okay, fine. So now we are going into the ribs. So we have 12 pairs of ribs. So that makes it 24, right? So each rib has a thin flat bone connected dorsally to the vertebral column. So your ribs are connected to the vertebral column at the back and sternum in the front. Okay. So it has two articulation surface on its dorsal side. So you are able to move this side and that side. So again, it has two articulation surface on its dorsal side. So this articulation surface is bicephalic. So that was dicondylic. This is bicephalic. Fine. So the first 7 pairs of the ribs are called as true ribs because they are like good students. Okay. So these true ribs are properly attached to the vertebral column on the dorsal side, and ventrally it is attached to the sternum. So the 8, 9 and 10, right? So the 8, 9 and 10th rib, they are attached to the vertebral column, but in the front they are not attached to the sternum. They are connected to the 7th rib, and which is connected to the sternum. Fine? So don't worry, I will explain. So this is the false rib. So the last 2 pairs of ribs are the floating ribs. So the thoracic vertebrae plus the ribs plus the sternum makes up the rib cage. So here we have the picture of the ribs. So we have 12 pairs. So one here and one here, right? So that is how 12 pairs. So totally we have 24 ribs. So the first 7 pairs are called as true ribs. Why? Because it is dorsally attached to the vertebral column and ventrally it is attached to the sternum. Fine, so it is properly connected. So this is the sternum and these are the ribs. So this blue color is a cartilage that is known as the hyaline cartilage. So this one is the hyaline cartilage. Fine. So the 8th, 9th and the 10th rib, it is called as the false rib. Why? Because dorsally it is attached to the vertebral column, but ventrally it is attached to the 7th rib. It is not attached to the sternum, so it is called as the false rib. So the last 2 pairs, that is the 11th and the 12th rib, they are known as the floating ribs. Fine. Why? Because they are only connected dorsally to the vertebral column, and in the front they are never connected. Can you see it is hanging mid-head? So this is the 11th and the 12th. So 8, 9, 10, they are not attached to the sternum, but they are attached to the hyaline cartilage. Right? Yes? Hyaline cartilage does not help in articulation. Hyaline cartilage only connects the ribs to the sternum. Okay, so that is the function of the hyaline cartilage. So we are done with the ribs. So once again, so we are talking about the axial skeleton, which is 80 bones. The first one is skull. So the skull has 29 bones. The sternum is 1. So together we have 30 now. So the ribs are 12 pairs. So it is 24. So then we have the vertebral column, which is 26. So together it gives you 80. So we have sorted how the axial skeleton has 80 bones. Are we done? Yes. So the remaining 126 bones, how it is present, where it is present, that is the story for tomorrow's class. Is this clear to everyone? Yes. So did you understand what is axial skeleton? So how did we get 80? So what are the ones that account for the 80 bones? Is it clear? Yes, you should understand because you have questions based on them. Yes, any more doubts? Is it clear? Yes, okay, fine. Okay, so I guess, okay, what is rib cage? So this is your rib cage. So your thoracic vertebrae, so the 12 thoracic vertebrae, the ribs and the sternum makes up the rib cage. So this is your rib cage, which forms a cage, right? Which houses your heart, your lungs, etc. So the thoracic vertebrae, your ribs along with the sternum makes up the rib cage. Yes, so with this we come to the end of today's lecture. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. So if you genuinely like my way of teaching, so please do like, share and subscribe. So I will meet you tomorrow at 5:15 p.m. So until then, stay tuned and take care. Bye.